All right, we're ready to go. All right, good evening. You all know me. I'm your city clerk and also the ARPA program manager. And so I just wanted to go ahead and quickly point to the discussion items for this evening. I'm just going to quickly go over some quick glance of ARPA spending nationally, an update on the focus groups, a new ARPA webpage that I'm working on with Colleen and IT, the discussion of nonprofits and the housing rehabs and demolitions, and then just to get some direction from council on moving forward. Todd, did you have anything to add to that? Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay, so ARPA at a quick glance. So the local government ARPA investment tracker, which is a partnership of the National League of Cities, the National Association of Counties, as well as Brookings Metro, actually tracks all of the ARPA projects that are going on, and it's available to the public. I can give you all the website if you're interested in looking. And as of December 7th, Tier 2 local governments, which are defined as under 250,000, but received more than 10 million in ARPA funding. So City of Rock Island. The other tiers are Tier 1, which is metro cities, and then Tier 5 cities under 250 that received less than 10 million. So here we are, as of December 7th, 1,492 local city governments reported 13,642 projects and $10.3 billion since ARPA's inception. So that's just one component, and so we can kind of visualize what that's doing for our economy nationally, for our cities and governments nationally. And then I just wanted to point out a few projects that other cities are doing, just to kind of give City Council some indication that we're on the right track with ARPA. Other cities are doing similar things. So for example, I don't want to read them all off. Fargo, North Dakota, because that's my hometown. They're also investing $1.25 million in new financial software. Of course, we're doing that as well. Peoria, just down the road, they're a little bigger than us, so they're putting a little bit bigger a chunk into housing rehab. Just Covington, Kentucky, I don't know if all of you know where that's at, the Cincinnati border. It's a pretty nice area. They're investing a lot in their city parks. And then Evanston, Illinois is purchasing new vehicles for their police, fire, and public works, same kind of thing we do. So I just wanted to kind of give council just a brief at a glance of some other projects going on nationally. Okay, and then next, one of the big reasons why we're here is the focus groups. So as you all recall, we had 3 focus groups held back in October, and back in late August, early September, I put out a press release, solicited on the city website as well as Facebook, asking stakeholders and residents of Rock Island, if they wanted to volunteer. It was certainly open and they could do so. And of course, we had a council person that headed up each one of those. So the first one was homelessness, and that was Alderwoman Jenny Swanson. And you can see the list of individuals. We had some wonderful discussion and lots of stakeholders involved in that. And one thing we learned, which a lot of it we already knew, is that homelessness continues to be a concern, not just for Rock Island, but our region and nationally. We know that Christian Care is here in Rock Island. However, they are not a low barrier shelter, meaning sobriety is a requirement. So all of those individuals that need shelter are going over to Humility in Davenport. Also, Humility is the only one regionally that has the winter shelter, and the local agencies seem to be working together, getting that going. Of course, participants discussed a wide variety of issues they faced, including, the red tape with, access to funding, of course, and, the lack of affordable housing, the need for showers and lockers, the better communication among all the various agencies providing services, and so on and so forth. And I just kind of provided a brief update on that. My full report is on the website, and anybody can have it. I sent that out, I think, in December to council that had the more detailed list. Okay. And then next, the mental health focus group led by Alderperson Randy Hurt. And as you can see, there were a number of experts in our mental health field here in Rock Island that participated in that discussion. And again, you know, there's a lot of challenges, more so than there ever have been because of the result of COVID. And the ability to access mental health services, it's pretty difficult. And also the number of people that are fleeing the field, it's pretty dramatic. And that's where the need is. There isn't enough people to help with this crisis. And so when people really need services, when they're in crisis mode, a lot of times they're not provided. There's no care after 5 p.m. That was identified. Other than the emergency room, there's basically no other resources. There are several other things that were identified, just that there needs to be more collaborative approach with the schools, families, and other agencies. You know, maybe some trauma training in the community, the need for more beds at mental health facilities, just the need in general for more resources and services, and not just in Rock Island, but in the area. And so the recommendation is, I just remind you all that this is unrestricted funds, so we don't have to comply with that 2024 or expended by 2026 deadline. So Todd and I, we've had a couple of meetings. We met with Alderperson Hurt and Swanson, and we're still exploring some options. So our recommendation for those two groups tonight is continue exploring those options, and obviously the partnerships, to make sure that we come up with, you know, something really good that we can do with this money, and not just here's $250,000 and then there we go. We want to make impactful, long-term decisions with these two specific areas. Okay, and then moving along to tourism, and those were Alderwoman Judith Gilbert and Alderman Dylan Parker. And as you can see, we also had a number of individuals in our community, stakeholders. We had a resident. Again, anybody was able to participate if they wanted to in these. And what was discussed is we understand that tourism is a regional approach. We had Visit Quad Cities here, Charlotte Morrison. She provided us some data, and they use a data analytic tool, and they supply that for the whole region, so not Rock Island, Davenport, Bettendorf, and even the littler communities too, LeClaire, and so on and so forth. The main thing that kind of came out of this is that we need a staple event, an attraction. We need to do an inventory of our assets. You know, what does Rock Island have? You know, what are some of the uniqueness? What's some of the uniqueness of Rock Island that, you know, tells a story? John Looney, right? The history of the NFL. You know, we have some pretty unique, cool things. And then there was some discussion also about, you know, having an art community and so on and so forth. So Todd and I met with Alderperson Parker and Alderwoman Gilbert, and based on that feedback from the tourism stakeholder group as well as both council members, we thought that maybe the city council would like to move forward and explore a feasibility of establishing a destination management and marketing organization, or referred to as destination management organization or destination marketing organization. They're all the same kind of thing, through the RFP process. So I don't know if Dylan or Judith would like to speak a little bit more to that.
It was an interesting meeting with all of our stakeholders, and I think the consensus was that we participate regionally with Visit Quad Cities, but there's a need for a local tourism kind of boots on the ground effort in Rock Island, promoting our own tourism assets, events, etc. And this would be the way to do it. Dylan can explain further. He knows more about it.
Big picture, right? 30,000 foot. No, really what I took away from the focus group discussion and then our follow-up conversation after that is we all saw the bullet item list of all the things, and Samantha, you went over a number of them, you know, and when you get a group of Rock Islanders in a room together, they say, you know, what can we do for tourism? Well, we should do this, we should do that, we should do this, we should do that. But like everything that we discuss up here at this table, it always comes down to who's gonna do it. and, how are we gonna fund it, right? Those are always the challenges that we run into. And so, it was identified through our conversations that really we don't have somebody, again, like Alderperson Gilbert said, we have a regional entity that does regional tourism, and they're a wonderful partner, and we should continue partnering with Visit Quad Cities for a regional approach, but we don't really have a local person that does this work. I really see some comparisons between what we have done for the downtown and this effort, right? Because we took our time with creating a downtown place management organization. We didn't just rush out and start doing the work of a downtown place management organization. We thought through it long-term. We thought, how do we do this sustainably? How do we do this so that there's somebody here for the next 10 years, not just this first year? Because you can go through this initial $250,000 that we have allocated for tourism. We could give it to 3 organizations and say, all right, we did tourism, but then it's done, right? So thinking a little bit more strategically, thinking a little bit more sustainably, how do we set up a DMMO for the city of Rock Island that can do this in perpetuity? Just like how we've taken that initial $250,000 we had in the downtown TIF, and instead of spending that on planters and benches and stuff like that, we use that money to leverage, and now we have established an SSA, and we're coming up with a downtown place management organization that will be able to do the work of downtown place management for years to come. So that is why this recommendation is being brought before the city council to allow us to explore who out there in the community wants to partner with the city of Rock Island to help us come up with this DMMO.
Okay, thank you, Dylan.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, and
Go ahead,
I
no.
should just say, and thank you to Samantha and Todd and Alderperson Gilbert and all of the members of the focus group that were in attendance. I mean, this is a group effort, as we can tell, so I appreciate everyone's rowing in the same direction and coming up with this recommendation.
Absolutely, we're all a team, right? Okay. I just wanted to briefly touch on, this isn't the best example because Colleen in IT and I are working on, she's helping me with a new webpage dashboard, and what we envision here is just putting everything on there in a very, user-friendly way, find information instead of just like stacked up the way it is now. If you look at how the ARPA information is presented, it's not great. So I want to make that more updated, and then also just providing the status of each project. As I start reporting out a lot of these projects, we're really getting going with these projects now. We're gonna have a lot of information to report. People may wanna know what's the status on Dankman Park, for example. And then we'll be able to tell them that. So I'll be putting all the reports, the quarterly reports, that I have to provide to the United States Treasury on there as well. So that's up and not up yet. It says it's up in under construction, but that's coming hopefully the end of this month. So, and then just to kind of give you an idea, you'll be able to click on each. If you recall, we did the guiding principles, and then we had them broken down by each guiding principle. And so somebody will be able to click, oh, I want to see what's going on with infrastructure projects. And then it's going to come down to all of the ones that we have under that category, and it'll give the amount, the justification, and then also the project status. Is it started, not started, complete, 100%, 50%? So people will really be able to dive into that. Okay. And then next, we want to talk about our nonprofit that we discussed back in September. We had that study session back in December, and September, and I was told that to go ahead and collect data and information from those 4 nonprofits, which I did. I provided that information to council. I have it if anybody needs it, the email that I provided. And those 4, if you recall, are the Botanical Center, Backwater Gamblers, MLK, and the QC Arts. And so what I did was I just made a slideshow because all the information they provided don't fit into a PowerPoint. So I just pulled 2 or 3 things about each group that were provided to us. One of the first one was Botanical Center. And as you can see, the initial proposed funding amount was $150,000, and there are some statistics there. Backwater Gamblers, proposed funding amount of $100,000. Those funds talks about what they would be used for, the two projects, and then it just goes on to discuss how many visitors they attract and the impact in the local economy, et cetera. MLK. Now, I want to be clear here because this is a little bit different than what was presented back in September. So the proposed funding amount is $90,000. And that is because there is an additional $50,000 needed for the West End Renaissance project. So if you guys recall, in the budget right now, we allocated $50,000 because that's all, is Jerry here tonight? That's all Jerry had thought he needed at the time, right? This was up and coming. He didn't really know, didn't really have a ballpark. But now that has increased to $100,000. So that's an extra $50,000. In addition, Alderperson Robinson, we had discussed, additional funding for the MLK Day to get that, so, some seed money to make sure that continues to grow and one of our events that we have here in Rock Island. And then, of course, you all are aware of the services that the King Center provides. Obviously, a lot of it's our youth programs, but there are other things as well that I don't know if everybody's aware of. So there's that one. And Quad City Arts, that proposed funding amount was $50,000. And again, their location is in downtown Rock Island. They're probably most known for the Chalk Art Fest. I know that's a big deal here, and that's now home to Rock Island. And so they provide a lot of funding for our school programs and things like that, and they do a lot of things with our artists locally. They have the Visiting Artists Series, and so on and so forth. Okay, so next, Miles tack on a couple of his things here. Housing rehab. If everybody recalls, we allocated $250,000 for housing rehab, and it is recommended by our CED department that we should incorporate that into the existing owner-occupied housing for LMI households. And if I'll do the demolitions, and then if anybody has questions, I will look at Miles to answer. The other thing, of course, is demolitions, and you can see that was a house that was demoed back in 2021. That's just one example. We all know there's a lot of blight in our city. $250,000 allocated for demolitions, and this will be incorporated into our existing program and process, our list that we have going on. Okay, so for tonight, what we're looking for is a recommendation on the tourism, whether or not council's okay with moving forward with that. Housing rehabs and the demolitions, because Miles will be coming forward with that to council. And then also, what is the recommendations for our nonprofits? How does council want to move forward?
Yes, sir. Mark.
Thank you. With my question is, are we spending $250,000 for rehab and an additional $250,000 for demolition, so effectively $500,000?
Correct. Yep. For each category, actually, the federal government has allowed expenditure categories specifically for both of those, and a lot of cities are, I would say most cities are using ARPA funds for both of those.
Thank you.
Moses.
You're welcome.
Out of that 250 for demolition, how many houses are we looking at?
Miles.
So typically, it depends a little bit on the size of the house and the degree to which we might need to do any sort of remediation for something like asbestos. Our usual kind of single house demo, the typical size we see with the typical asbestos contamination we have, is usually about $20,000. So that's the typical range. Now, the way that this is worded, this could also be used for commercial structures if those two were blighted. So that could range much more broadly.
When can city council expect some policies governing how properties are selected for demolition? Been waiting for a while.
Yes, the building official has been working on that, and I believe has some draft policies prepared. He and I have not had an opportunity to sit down and review those in detail, but that work has been continuing in anticipation of this particular thing, but also just more generally when we do our regular CDBG-funded demos and other things.
Right. I guess,
So a specific timeline, I'm not sure. I would hope something maybe within the next month would be prepared for your review to coincide with the beginning disbursement of this funding source.
yeah, it would be my request that we have those policies approved before we allocate more funding for demolition.
Staff is in alignment in that desire.
Thank you.
Can you check and see if the house that's on the southwest corner of 7th Avenue and 17th Street is on the list? I was told it was on the list years ago for demolition.
Is this the White House?
Yep.
We can check into it.
That one too.
Yeah, I am familiar with that particular
Do
structure.
you have a list now of homes that are listed? How many?
So if folks roll back a few months, you'll recall that an internal memo was prepared kind of talking about the way staff approach the demolition process currently, and how there is not at any given time a set demolition list. There is instead a pretty large number of properties that we are monitoring. When the time comes every year for us to go out to bid, we do a check of all of those properties, and then any that have crossed a threshold of kind of no return, we then put together and rank in severity, and then we demo from the top of the list down. But at any given time, it's not exactly correct to say that there is a set demo list. It's actually an ever-shifting thing, because some properties do improve following enforcement action. So there is not right now a set demo list. So the question, how many properties at any given time do we think need to be demolished, is a highly flexible number.
And these are not all properties the city owns, then, correct?
With the exception perhaps of the Bear Manufacturing Building that has been discussed here before, as worst case scenario, we'd have to use some of this money to help tear that down. All of the structures that we would be considering for demo are currently not in city ownership. The vast majority of them are just vacant and abandoned houses.
Alderman Lewis.
I see that we have a person, at least from one of the organizations, from Backwater Gamblers here. Would it be appropriate to allow him to speak before the council, or no?
Nah, not at this point.
Okay, fair enough.
In fairness to everybody, yes, sir.
Well, because we don't have all of the organizations available.
Right.
Again, I wanted to have council's approval to,
But I appreciate that, but everybody's been fed a lot of the information from all those organizations.
fair enough, thank you.
Housing rehab, do you see that being 100% on a project, or a match, 75%, 50%? How do you anticipate that being doled out?
So the way that we've talked about it internally with the Community Development Division is to basically plug and play it exactly with the CDBG-funded housing rehab program that we already have. The only difference, and this is one of those things that is still under discussion, is whether or not there should be a forgivable loan component. So the way that the CDBG-funded housing rehab program works is the city covers 100% of the costs associated with the rehab project, and then in exchange, the homeowner agrees to basically a mortgage, a lien on their property, where they have to stay in the house in good standing for a period of 5 years. So basically, your loan is forgiven in exchange for you living there for a 5-year period. We're still discussing if we want, with the ARPA funds, for that to be exactly the same way. We're kind of exploring whether or not the regulations that are specific to ARPA might sway us one way or the other. But otherwise, the basic structure of the program that we already have would just be made larger. So we would just be putting in this money to what we're already doing and most efficiently spending it down.
Have we not in the past, or sometimes when we've done demos, put a lien on the property? Have we done, because sometimes we demo things, and we
Yes.
don't own them, we condemn them.
Yep.
And they have, and we put a lien on the property, so we potentially could get some monies back when
Well,
that's sold.
as a matter of practice, yes, it is true that we will often do that. I mean, it's very rare we ever get that money back.
Yes.
So as a principle, the goal is to do that, but in practice, very often, whoever's the owner of record walks. I would invite the city attorney to add comment.
Yeah, I would say, especially very seldom do you get the money back with regard to that particular property. Every once in a while, you have somebody that has other properties that they forget about the fact that there's that lien covering all of their property within the county. And then
Yes.
you get a call up and they say, hey, why do I need to pay this? That's the most common way to get it back.
And then we do enjoy reminding them why they need to pay it.
So we have had some opportunity, at least there's opportunity if they own other
We,
properties.
we do our best, CED and legal team working to collect if we can, but admittedly, I mean, if the property owner is out in California or Georgia and they just abandon it, and there's nothing else in the county for us to lien, we're not likely to collect.
And one of the things that we could consider in the future, just came to mind, is if you have individuals who you think might be, it's kind of the Bill Handel thing, right? Don't get a judgment against somebody who doesn't have money because it's not worth anything, but if they had property somewhere else, you can't always transfer a local judgment to a location where you think that they have property as well. So that might be a way to address some of the absentee landlords.
And some of these strategies and approaches are things that realistically should be included in the larger kind of demo process, procedure, policy documents that we've been working on so that we can clarify, when we take these steps to demo, there's follow-up as well.
Well, make that part of a checklist. Do they find out if they own property somewhere else? And then if they do, go down that path.
And it's likely if we become successful in that, then the counter strategy to that is to put everything in an LLC. I mean, down the road, then they say, well, each property has its own LLC, but it's worth a shot. The cost maybe $60 to transfer the judgment, so.
With respect to housing rehabilitation more broadly, is there thought within your department as to how we could, avoid a scattershot strategy that it just sort of feels like we're just dumping endless amounts of money into not saying overall improvement in the housing stock across the city of Rock Island, right? There's some hesitation of, what's the difference between the 450,000 and then the extra 900,000? Or, the difference that we're talking about in CDBG and housing rehabilitation, et cetera. Like, is there any thought as to how we can either gauge the improvements that we're making to be able to not just have it feel like we're just spending money and nobody really has a sense as to how this is improving the community, or like focusing on certain neighborhoods so that you can see significant improvement across a neighborhood, and so then you move from neighborhood to neighborhood around the city. I mean, this is not exactly the best time, or not the best setting to have sort of a spitballing session, but,
So those are good points and things that I would hope that can be discussions can be had with the Community Development Commission. Because part of the need for that group is to have these kind of longer form conversations about how are we measuring our success?
Right.
And are we accomplishing what we set out to? I would say in regards to the idea of it being a little scattershot, I mean, it is citizens applying wherever they happen to be in the community seeking assistance from us. We try to promote our programs as best we can so that we blanket the whole of the community and let them know that resource is available.
Right.
But ultimately, if a homeowner doesn't apply, they didn't apply.
Well, I remember in the targeted neighborhood program that when Chandler was here, was much celebrated. The reason that I was particularly excited about that was that it was my understanding that there was going to be a dedicated inspector driving around Greenbush in my ward in Keystone and the West Side that would maybe more proactively be canvassing a neighborhood and
Yes.
saying, hey, they have a soffit that's damaged. We should make sure to inform
Yep.
them, right?
And that did take place. The issues that we ran into were very often that the properties that the inspector was identifying were not owner occupied and therefore not eligible to receive the assistance we had available.
Right.
But also all of the applicants that we were receiving out of the TARP areas came to us having never been cited for anything or ever approached. They just were seeking resources on their own. And so it didn't seem to change the dynamic of how projects came our way. The way that we're thinking about this, and Again, this is a slightly bigger conversation, so I don't want to, take up all the oxygen in the room on it right now. But with more money in the programs, we can move through that wait list that we have more quickly, and we can cover more of the community and help more people more rapidly. The impact overall may be better felt when there's more happening at a given time. Obviously, looking back over the last, let's say, maybe 10 years, the number of projects completed every year has gone up dramatically. So we are working in the right direction. But this question of exactly how are we measuring success, what are we trying to see as the outcome, what are the metrics we're using, those are all things that we hope to discuss in greater detail with the CDC and kind of work with them as community advocates to get a better sense of what we should be really looking at.
Miles, I got a quick follow-up.
I just was curious about the CDC real quick.
Okay.
Can we just be notified when the first meeting of that is? I'd like to be present, that's all.
Sure, we're still working on recruiting members.
That's fine.
So,
Yes.
So I just got a quick follow-up with kind of going back to demos.
yes.
So we all know, First Ward, you can probably spend everything we got from ARPA on demoing a lot of the houses in First Ward. I really would like to see us have a plan in place, instead of just tearing a house down and then it's a vacant lot, what turns into a farm or a garden. Have a plan in place so we can get something back in there. If that's working with some developers, working with some, whoever, so we can get a house back in that location, instead of just tearing it down and then leaving it vacant, like we have all over the First Ward right now.
Yeah, there's two things I want to say really quickly to that. First, in some cases, there is no other alternative but to tear the house down because it presents such a severe safety hazard for the
I
public.
get that. I
So,
get that.
so sometimes there's just no way around it. It has to come down, and unfortunately, there's just going to be a vacant lot. The second thing, though, and I'm glad this is coming up as a discussion. I know it's something I've spoken with the city manager a little bit about, but we do have a number of planning documents that talk about housing and our needs for housing, but at a pretty generalized level. And there are documents like the Impediments to Fair Housing document that is part of our HUD-required consolidated 5-year plan that give us some generalized guidance. But what we really probably need to talk about having for the community is a strategic housing development plan. Because a lot of these questions that we have are really about the nitty-gritty details of what kind of incentive programs do we need to have, what sort of partnerships do we need to cultivate. CED as a department is pretty open about the fact we're not housing developers. We work to create an environment in which housing developers and any kind of economic developer can do good work. So this kind of questioning is, I think, really highlighting the need to move in that more strategic direction and get down into the details of what we really want to do. We have a pretty good baseline with some generalized information in our existing plans. We probably need to dig deeper.
I have a question as a follow-up to Alderman Robinson's. So you had said earlier that these homes that have to be demolished, they're not in city ownership, they're often vacant and abandoned. So when we demo them, who takes care of the vacant lot?
So it depends a little bit, but most often it's us going and mowing it even though we are not the owner.
And how many vacant lots do we have to mow?
Hundreds.
That's what I mean.
It's a-
Yeah,
Vacant-
that's why
vacant-
I'm pointing it out.
Yeah, vacant lots in some cases, of course, are being maintained by the owner, even if we've gone and done the demo. Sometimes a neighbor is going and taking care of it. Alderman Robinson, I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of your neighbors who are doing that kind of work in the First Ward.
I'm one of them.
Praise be to them, saving the city a little money here and there, but they shouldn't have to do that. It's a substantial cost. Vacant and abandoned property, be it with a building or a lot, costs cities like Rock Island a pretty penny. It's a significant issue, and that's why we have tried to find more creative solutions, like the community garden program, to try to manage that property, though there are, of course, always ways in which those alternative methods could be improved as well. So there is a cost. Alderman Poulos, I think you had a question?
I did, and it actually refers back to some of the other comments that have been made. Is there a possibility that alderpersons can have a list of available housing that is in their ward so that we can try to keep an eye up or at least follow up on what's going on with those housings or those houses that are either in need of rehab or available for rent?
City staff is not in a position where we are able to track everything that might be listed for sale, for rent, or which may or may not have like rehabilitation potential. We can, of course, share any information we have about what we have cited for property maintenance or building violations, but we don't have a way to track, what is or isn't popping onto the market.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Real quick, I just wanted to, so two things here. One, we have talked to Gorman Group about the infill type deal as far as developing, and they talked about when they get their bigger project done, that they would take a look at that as far as one developer. I also want to give, real quick, because I can't see Alderwoman Swanson's hand to jump in, and so, Jenny, do you have anything?
I don't have anything on the housing demolition thing, but I do have a suggestion. As we're looking at the nonprofit information for like the MLK Center, that additional $50,000 for the West End Renaissance Project, can that be moved and combined with that other 50,000 just to make it cleaner? I just think it's really confusing to have $50,000 in one place on that sheet that Samantha gave us in September that listed out by the quartiles. There's $50,000 approved there, and now we've got another $50,000 in the nonprofit. And I just think it would just be cleaner and easier to understand if we could just increase that one $50,000 amount to $100,000, because I don't really think it belongs in the nonprofit area, but it belongs with the other amount. That's my only suggestion.
That was gonna be my next question, because I was confused on this also.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was what executive director provided me. So but he is going to come back to council and ask for the full 100,000. So
They put it all in one pot.
absolutely.
And
Yep.
one description
Yep.
for that.
And we can get a little more information on why the increased,
Yeah,
what are the
absolutely.
increased expenditures needed,
Being spent on, too.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, real quick, just a second. I think was there somebody over here had a question? Nope. Okay, go ahead, Judith.
so I just have a couple of comments about the additional 400,000 for the tourism not-for-profits. So this process was not open to all tourism-related organization, events, et cetera. These 4 requests were basically private requests made to the city. In light of one of our agenda items tonight, where we have a shortfall of almost $1 million on the 11th Street Water Main Reconstruction Project, I just don't see how we can justify 400,000 additional tourism money, in additional to the other 250,000 we're spending, when that could fund almost half of the shortfall for this project. This project has been on the CIP list for years. It was supposed to have been done last year or maybe the year before, but then IDOT and EPA made some additional changes, which also then increased the cost, as well as just general construction costs going up. But we need to pay for our essential projects first, in my opinion. And if and when we do go forward with these recommendations, again, this was not an open process. I think we'll have to vote on them individually because of conflicts, so.
Yeah, we're looking for direction on the tourism recommendation and the not-for-profit recommendations in terms of next steps. If the council's comfortable moving forward with the tourism recommendation, eventually we'll bring back some kind of an agreement to do that feasibility work. And then the same would be true for the not-for-profits. If you're comfortable moving forward with those, we would draft separate agreements for each one of those groups and bring them back for approval.
I'm comfortable with the tourism recommendation that I was a part of making, and I'm not comfortable with the nonprofit recommendation.
Any specific part of the nonprofit?
All of them.
Yeah, I just don't like the process we
Vote
did with
no on all
nonprofit.
of them.
You are or not?
Alderman Parker
Second one, I
and
didn't hear.
Robinson.
In favor
Correct.
of the nonprofit.
Because I think we either need to make a decision, either we're gonna request, an application process, open it up, or we're not gonna do it. Because there's a way we're doing it right now, this just isn't right. Again, I'm still confused on how the 3 got up there. I know with the King Center, because I've mentioned that before, but I'm still confused on how the other
So-
3 got up there.
So the mayor made those recommendations, and then Todd and I brought them forward back in September for the 4, and then you guys had asked for us to get additional information. When I had spoke with council individually regarding the process for nonprofits or any other money they wanted to get, the majority of council did not want to do an application process. So that's why I moved forward without that. But if the majority of council want that, or how do you guys want to move forward specific to the nonprofits?
Number of cities have done this way, appointments, or picked them versus application. And once again, the indications council a long time ago was not to do the applications.
So if we're not gonna do an application process, then we shouldn't do anything at all.
Why?
Why?
'Cause
I mean, I don't want to get into the optics, first of all, of what it looks like. It just looks bad how it looks. Just the connection with some of the people that sits on council, and then their organization is the one selected. So that's just the first thing. I just think to keep it that way, we either do with application process or you don't do anything at all. Because I'm guarantee you, there's a lot of other nonprofits that will benefit from some of this money. And again, if they don't have the connection with someone on council to get their name in, that's just not right.
It
That's
really-
my
It really had nothing to do with connections, but yeah, go
I'd
ahead.
like to speak up on this. So let me preface my comments by saying we did not go through an application process with the money to Friendship Manor. So let me just bring that up as a point of reference. In addition, when we initially talked about these different things that all came up, some of this, we tried to keep the nonprofit verbiage out of this. And because really, some of this, you can also apply, you could apply Botanical Center to tourism. You could apply Backwater Gamblers to tourism and not call it a nonprofit. I mean, that could be in a different category. I mean, it's almost like where you put it. Same thing with the arts. I mean, so I don't really like that term because I think we talked about not even including that because then it leads us to this whole show that's going on now. Now I feel like we're throwing this nonprofit thing back into the conversation, which we specifically did not want to call it that when we first set up the ARPA categories or the verbiage that we set up initially. So
We also talked about trying to take ARPA monies and increase that dollar amount, like we did with the grant downtown, with the state grant, the $3 million, along with Arts Alley. And I'm drawing a blank on, I think there was a couple others, and that's what this also does, comes back, and I want to say twofold or better. If you look at the numbers that the organizations have given us of what they bring back to the Quad City, or to Rock Island or the Quad Cities, potentially, I mean, once again, we've seen the information, is that, there's, they estimate that the Quad City Arts, brings back 4.4 million, and that I think it was Backwater Gamblers, 900,000 annually. And same thing with the Botanical Center, I don't see that on this deal, but on the detailed. And so that's an advantage, something to go for is, how can we turn this money into even more benefit to the community? And so that's, once again, you're taking, why not take advantage of that?
I will question some of those numbers that we're putting on here as far as the impact with the city. And again, I'm trying to keep it just high level. I don't really want to start nitpicking and going deep into stuff. I just think it doesn't look well. There's really no justification for us to do it this way. We voted or decided not to do anything with nonprofits. That's what we decided. We didn't want to touch it. So I don't think we should be going this way either.
Okay, so we take the money and allocate it over tourism, add it to tourism, and put these under tourism instead of nonprofit.
what I'm saying.
You could take, if you want to do that,
Because then there is not an application process if we do it that way.
But you still fund them?
sure.
Yeah.
but it's not under nonprofits.
It's under tourism.
And it's under tourism. I mean, once again, these numbers were put together by a third party. Visit Quad Cities put these numbers together. It wasn't something those organizations put together, and/or the city, anybody from the city put together, if you want to call it a third party independent, put the return on investments together.
We're $1 million short on the 11th Street water main reconstruction, which has been put off. And the proposal from the department was then shifting a whole lot of projects further into the future. And every time as we go into the future, there's that many more water projects, sewer projects that come up. Our infrastructure is old. So it's just going to exacerbate that problem more and more. This is what ARPA funds were for, water and sewer projects. We have almost $400,000 that we're talking about allocating here. There was $100,000 in savings on the parking garage demo bid. That's $500,000 right there. We're halfway to funding the shortfall.
Okay, so does anybody else have any thoughts on the nonprofits? Are we tabling it, or how should Todd and I move forward?
I'd like it to be removed from a nonprofit
Okay,
classification.
because September
Where?
I was told to remove it from tourism.
Would
So
you
I
like
want to
to-
make sure,
That's where we talked.
I
about
want
was
to make sure we're
tourism.
putting it back in tourism.
I
Okay,
thought we were going to tourism on those.
Okay.
okay,
I recommend we table it until we get some further discussion with council.
absolutely. Okay,
Agree with that.
okay.
This is Alderman Swanson. I really struggle with the fact that we handed Friendship Manor money without an application, but now we're having a discussion about not giving other nonprofits money because we want them to have an application. So I think one of the things council needs to do is we all need to get on the same page about stuff. Either we're going to require people to do an application or we're not, and we're not going to just gift people money because somebody bullied us into doing it. So I think we need to be really careful about things. I agree, we need to table this, the nonprofit discussion. I don't think they should be called nonprofits because it's more tourism than anything else. But I think we all need to have a discussion and get on the same page on what exactly do we want to call this and what do we want to do. I fully support giving these agencies money because I do believe the only way Rock Island is going to grow is if we bring people into our town, and this is how we bring people into our town. And if we want people to come to our town, and if we're willing to take tourism money and put it into a DMMO, then you got to have something for people to come and see. I mean, that's just my 2 cents.
I would,
Alderperson Swanson, I totally agree with you, and this is why I voiced the same thing I'm saying right now with the Friendship Manor situation. If we don't come up with a process, if we don't come up with, it's going to continue to be this same thing over and over again. That's why I was not in agreement with the money going to them. Nothing about them, it was about the process. So again, this is another process that we're not fixing. And we're just making it up as we go. So either we fix the process or we don't do it. That's why I'm saying table it until we can have a further discussion and figure out how we're going to do this going forward, because it just looks bad.
I think this is why I was personally an advocate for not getting ahead of ourselves when it comes to tourism, right? The recommendation that has been put before this body with respect to tourism is that before we run off and decide how to allocate funding for tourism, we set up an organization, a structure that will be able to help us strategically come up with programs and projects with respect to tourism, right? That's why the proposal is to find somebody that can help us set up a DMMO, which certainly, I would say, this would be a part of their charter. This is what they're supposed to do. But I am not a tourism expert. I have no idea as to whether this is and it's, I like all of the organizations listed, but I don't know if it's a good return on investment, et cetera, right? And so that's why it's my position to set up an organization that can have a little bit more of a professional perspective on how we should be funding tourism in Rock Island before running off.
And I would agree with you with regard to that, because I think that if we have specific numbers that we can say, okay, XYZ Corporation brings in 50,000 people, or give a number, I don't really care. We should evaluate those different organizations that are actually bringing people into Rock Island. If we're gonna talk about tourism, let's say, okay, who is bringing people, which organizations are bringing people into Rock Island, and what is the heads and beds, benefit to the city of Rock Island?
$1 per person, whatever that breaks down. Unfortunately, look at it business-wise. We just want to generate people in here, and we want to spend the most amount of money to get the most amount of people here.
Right.
Break it down that way.
And
We
let,
need to table this.
let the different organizations say, these are the number of people that we can bring in. This is what, these are the benefits that it brings to Rock Island. You make the decision.
Can we all agree, though, at least to take this nonprofit tag off of these
Take 'em-
items?
Those three at least.
These three at least,
And
for
move it
sure.
over to tourism.
Please.
Okay.
I'm just
And
asking.
move the dollars over
Just so
there.
our ARPA manager has some clarification from the council.
I
on
would
which
agree.
Thank you.
direction to go.
Thank
Move the dollars over there.
Okay,
Right.
We haven't had that discussion yet.
We got 10 minutes left.
so
We got 10 minutes left.
if I could just,
Go ahead.
real quick, I think we're all on the same page with regards to the focus group tourism recommendation from Alderpersons Gilbert and Parker?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. So, go ahead, Alderwoman Gilbert. I think you had a question.
Another question.
Well, no, I just want to bring Miles back up here to address that there was an application process with the rest of the COVID funding, that then ultimately the balance went to Friendship
Yeah,
Manor.
for all of the other preceding recipients of CDBG CV money, there was an application form available on the Forward platform.
But there was not one for, I was told there was not an application submitted by Friendship Manor, because I asked to see it.
That is correct. So, as the record will show from the meeting at which this was discussed, staff explained that about a year prior to that vote, the council had directed staff to put a pause on accepting any further applications and wait to see what the changing landscape looked like, and hold off on spending that remaining approximately 20% of our CDBG CV allocation until something else presented itself. Something then did present itself. It was brought to the council for discussion.
Can we conclude the conversation?
I would just say with respect to application or no application, it's not uncommon for cities to have application processes to allocate funding. It's also not uncommon for cities to identify, unique needs that people in the community have and fund them that way too.
Okay.
For the sake of time, can we?
Take your time.
Okay,
Yes, Anita, are you done?
I am. Did you have something to add?
I want clarity about something too. So I just want to make sure the other two items, Alderman Parker's comments taken under consideration for the development of some more detailed policies and procedures for demos and the like. Is there an agreement that those two things, the demos and the housing rehab, as basically presented, everyone is comfortable with?
As long as I get my policies.
Yeah, you
Good
said
with
you're
it.
coming back with some policies on some of that, right?
Yes, but is the reason I'm asking is because the way that CED's items as part of the overall portfolio of projects for ARPA, those are the two that are time restricted. So those are the two that I want to make sure we have time to appropriately utilize. So if everyone's comfortable with that, then we will proceed with that deeper dive into the details.
You have a yes for me?
Yes.
Okay.
Been
Very
good?
good.
All right, just wanted to check. Thank
I
you.
need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Seconded. Can you do a roll call?
Absolutely. Alderperson Gilbert,
Oh, aye.
Swanson,
I
Parker,
Aye.
Poulos,
Aye.
Healy,
Aye.
Robinson,
Aye.
and Hertz.